So good morning. Today's daf is Ketubot daf Kaf Zayin. We are actually already on Kaf Zayin. We're at the two dots, and we are talking about the in the last Mishnah that we learned that if a city is imprisoned, right? If a woman is imprisoned based on a monetary issue. So, for example, a family owes money. Thankfully, this doesn't happen today, but it used to be that somebody would be sent to debtor's prison. And so the Mishnah said that if they're owed money, the person that's causing, resulting in the person going into prison, well, then as the authorities will have the proper incentive to watch over the woman and make sure that she is not violated. And so as a result, we can assume that she's not going to be violated. On the other hand, we say that if there was a capital crime, if she's in jail because she or her husband or somebody committed a capital crime, well, and then she's at risk of losing her life, in which case there's a reasonable possibility that people will not care what happens to her. And so therefore, we cannot assume that in fact she is going to remain safe. All right, so now we're going to talk about that latter case, al yedei nefashot asura. If she's in jail, if she's in the prison system because of a capital crime, then she would be forbidden. And again, yesterday we talked about how is it forbidden to a normal husband? That is based on Rashi and Tosos. Rashi and Tosos understand, if we take a look at the last Rashi in the Mishnah on Kav Vav Bed, it says, Dehoel v'noagin b'hefker. Since she is going to be treated as if she's ownerless, as anybody could do whatever they want, we're worried that what she'll do is she'll actually take up with somebody. This is sort of you see this in prison movies all the time, right? That somebody takes up with somebody, not because they want to be with that person, but they want the protection that's associated with it. And we're concerned that, and Rashi seems to be suggesting that might be a sufficient willingness that it would result in her being prohibited to her husband. The Ramban totally disagreed with that and said, no, that's also considered ones, and ones is not going to trigger a prohibition with an ordinary husband. On the other hand, however, if the husband was a Kohen, he says that's what we're talking about, because then it doesn't make a difference that it was against her will. We say that she's not allowed to remain with her husband. Okay. So again, we're now jumping back in. So al yedei nefashot asura. Again, she's in prison because of a capital crime. So amarav kagon nashei ganavei. That actually this rule would also apply to the wives of thieves, and that's because in older days, even thieves would be put to death. And so you don't want to steal anything, especially in those days. And the point is that because the husbands would be put to death, so as a result, this is probably where Rashi got the concept of Noagin Bahefker. The concern is that other people would treat the wives as effectively open for free business. And the point is that apparently there was a system where if you stole something, you would be killed. All your possessions would be allowed to be taken by others in sort of like a revenge kind of system. And your spouse would be subject to the same. People could do whatever they want. But Valevi Amar Kagon Ishto Shel Ben Dunai. No. You have to actually, it has to be much worse. So who's Ben Dunai? So Rashi says, Rotseachaya, he was a murderer. The Elazar Shmo, his name was Elazar Ben Dunai. Kedamrina v'perag egla aruf, as we say in Masechah Sota, aval neshei ganavei hagonavim mamon lo mipkare. But if all you're doing is stealing money, meaning obviously if you kidnap somebody, that's often a capital offense. But if you just steal money, well, then we're not going to assume that the governments are that obnoxious to give that kind of penalty to the husband, that even if the husband ends up going to jail, that it means that anybody could do whatever they want with the spouse. So, and Amar Chizkiah says, so now when we say that in fact somebody is going to be in jail for the death penalty, according to Chizkiah, it needs to be that the death penalty was already sentenced. It's not enough to just be accused of a capital crime. You need to actually have been convicted of the capital crime. However, Rabbi Yochanan says no. No, even if you are only accused, that accusation seems to be sufficient, that we're going to be worried that the public at large will treat the spouse or treat the person who's in jail for that accusation, subject to that accusation, then as if it's a definitive thing. It also could be, by the way, not completely clear when it says shlo nigmar. I think shlo nigmar dinan really does mean the completion of the case. So it's almost certainly going to be somebody that's still only accused, and the judges have not yet reached a conclusion. So again, so we see that in fact, and it seems based on the note in the Ein Mishpat Ner Mitzvah, that in fact we paskin like the second opinion of Rabbi Yochanan, and I think that that's based on an understanding of legal systems at the time. It would be interesting to think about whether or not this is something that would change as in a modern country where we have legal protections. Although even in this country, and every country, even the legal protections for the accused are only somewhat effective. Okay. I'm sorry. Was it addressed in the show, or it could be. That's I have never seen that show, but I'm aware of it and its ilk, and so 100%. Oh, she is really. Oh, you pay. Okay. All right. So yes, exactly. It's very sad when somebody goes to jail. All right. Irshikivashua Karkum. So what happens if you have a city that is totally taken over by an army? So Kol konos shenimtzu besocha sulos. All the wives of the Kohanim, and this is maybe the basis, one of the bases for saying, for the Ramban saying that the last Mishnah was talking about Kohanim, is because now we're talking about Kohanim. Although again, you can argue in the other direction as well, that given the fact that here we explicitly say Kohanot, and there we didn't, we just said Baalim, so maybe not. But in any event, all the wives of the Kohanim are, will be considered that they have to be separated from their husbands. However, if they have witnesses that were there with them, that then in fact indicate that they were not taken advantage of, well then afilu eved and afilu shifcha, even if that witness is a slave man or a slave woman, Harei elu ne'emanim. The witnesses will be believed, and the woman will be able to stay with her husband. However, a person's not going to be believed to testify for himself. So as a result, if she testifies about herself, that's not going to be sufficient. So Viraminu, let's see if there is a contradiction, because we have another Mishnah, and this Mishnah is from Avodah Zarah. If you've got some troops coming to the city, bish'as shalom, at a time of peace, chaviyot psuchos asuros. Then in the cities, if they've got barrels of wine in the city, right? So because in those days, they didn't really drink that much water. They drank because the water was not as safe as the wine. So they drank a lot of barrels. So they would have open barrels in the city. And so we will be suspicious So those are asurot. They will become prohibited because we're worried that the non-Jews touch them, and as a result, they be considered yayin nesef, and so and prohibited. And indeed, where the real concern, I guess, at this time is that they actually would have used them for their idols. But stumot mutarot, if they're still sealed, well, then they are going to remain permitted. It's as if they had somebody watching over them, because we can tell that they were never opened. The shas milchama elu ve'elu mutaros. However, in wartime, all of the barrels are still considered permitted, because there's not enough time for them to engage in any kind of idolatry, because they're too busy fighting. So now the argument is that our Mishnah seemed to indicate that they had enough time to violate the women while there was war going on, but the Mishnah that we cited in Avodah Zarah seems to indicate that there's not enough time. So which is it? So Amar Mari Livol Yesh Panai, as you might expect, in order to have relations, of course they'll make time. Even the non-Jews have some of the issues that the Jewish people have, right? If it's for yourself, so you'll make the time. If it's for your God, so I don't know, maybe I won't make the time. So all right, so as a result, that we've answered this potential contradiction. So Rabbi Yitzchak bar Elazar Mishmei de Chizkiya Amar Kan b'charkom shel osa malchus. Kan b'charkom shel malchus acheres. So answer. So when another now we're going to try and make a distinction that sometimes you can have the wives of the Kohanim will remain permitted. That when you have a siege of, and again, there are going to be two ways that we can understand it. So start with Rashi. When you have a siege of your own kingdom, that you're trying to put down a rebellion or something along those lines, and the occupiers want to maintain the loyalty of the people who are local, well then, if it's a local king that's taking over a town, so then we don't need to worry about the women, because the king will want to make sure that everybody is happy and wants the king to stay in power. But kan b'charkom shel malchus acheres. But if there's another nation's king, so then they're here to take over, and they don't care about the local people, and so as a result, they're going to they'll burn, pillage, and God forbid rape. So I guess the God forbid goes on all three. Okay, so in any event, that is Rashi's explanation. Tosos, however, explains it in the exact opposite. He says the following, that when you have the local ruler, so then the local ruler is not subject to any third-party review, because he's the local ruler, interference, exactly. So as a result, he'll do whatever he wants. On the other hand, when you have somebody and you're in somebody else's land, at some point, justice may come up on you. And so as a result, so therefore, maybe you need to be more kind. And I guess we sort of see this in the world today. We see both attitudes in the world today. Many nations seem to be much more kind to their own citizens than to other citizens when they're, I think of the U.S. Army in this regard. But on the other hand, in places like Russia and other places, right, you're much, I don't know, maybe Russia is going to be just as bad too. Right, exactly. So, but in any event, you think that somehow even the people in the local, they lack any protection. So, all right. So now let's continue. So again, so shall also malchus nami. But maybe even in the case of the own kingdom, and we'll interpret it right now according to Rashi, maybe even in the case of the own kingdom, where you would think that everybody should be okay, maybe one of the soldiers will misbehave, and we should be worried about that. So Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, we're talking about where everybody's on guard. There's a good guard system. There's a good safeguard system. So but in a second, every guard has goes, rests for a little bit. So, maybe somebody will fall asleep. So Amar Rabbi Levi could go into Mahader law, the Masa Shushilta, the Chalba, the Gavza, the Avza. So they've got, the city surrounded with chains and dogs and spikes and skis, meaning that there's an alarm system associated with it. So even if somebody were to fall asleep, it would not, you still can't get, a bad guy would not be able to come in and do anything bad. So that's Rashi's understanding. Of course, Tosfos understands the exact opposite. Tosfos would say, no, the point is that even in a case where we think that maybe that the local kingdom would take advantage, surely it might be possible for one woman to escape. And then we say, no, we're going to assume that no women could possibly escape. So that's the approach according to Tosfos. So Amar Rabbi Abba, Amar Bar Zabda, Pligi Ba Rabbi Yehuda v'Nasiya v'Rabbanan. So Rabbi Yehuda and Nasiya and the rabbis disagreed. Chad Amar Kan b'Charkom shel Osa Malchus, Kan b'Charkom shel Malchus Acheres. So again, one of them said that with respect to this question of whether or not we need to be worried about one person trying to escape, they argue about whether we're talking about this local kingdom or a foreign kingdom. If we're talking about another kingdom, lo kashiv below midi, then it's not going to be a problem at all, because the fact that somebody would find his way into the city and violate a woman, so he's not going to be worried about it. So Chad Kashalei v'Kolhani. So the other one who says that we're talking about a local kingdom would be worried, because so why aren't we concerned about all this? Well, Mishani could go into Mahadir Leim L'Masa Shoshilta v'Chalba v'Gavza v'Avza. So he's the one who has to say that we're talking about where there's a full-fledged alarm system. But and so essentially what we've basically changed in this reading of a machlokas between Rabbi Abba and Rabbi Yehuda and Nasiya, and along with the rabbi, with the argument between Rabbi Yehuda and Nasiya and the rabbis, that argument, according to Rabbi Abba, is effectively determining whether or not we have this question in the first place. And so then that we had the question, so then again, we're going to answer the same answer, which is that we either have, according to Rashi, a system that prevents anybody from coming in and doing the wrong thing, or according to Tosfos, it's a system that prevents anybody from escaping. Okay, so now we're going to create an exception, a very important exception to this rule that we had in our Mishnah that said that all the wives of the Kohanim are going to be prohibited if they are besieged, if the enemy, if an army takes over the city and has fought for control of the city and successfully won control of the city. So Amar Rabbi Idi bar Avin, Amar Rabbi Yitzchak bar Ashan, Im Yesh Sham Machabao Achas. If you have a single hiding place, if you have even one hiding place, and there's a debate whether the Ramban says that the hiding place originally has to be large enough to hold all the women, but then he says, well, maybe it could be sufficient if it just holds a portion of the women. But in any event, the point is that if it holds even a portion of the women, matzelas al konos kulan, then it saves all the wives, because all the wives have the argument that if they say I was not molested, they could have said I was in the room, right? So again, based on the principle of pesha asar hu pesha heter, so as a result, they would be able to be okay. So by Rabbi Yirmiyah, what if the hiding place only holds one woman? So then, is it really reasonable for every woman in the whole town to be believed to say that I was not violated because I could say I was the one woman in that location? Of course it couldn't be. Can we say that every woman that this is the woman who made that, was in that hiding place? Or do we not say that? So maybe we could say that this is comparable to the case of two paths. This is a Mishnah in tahoros, but we saw it all the way back in Psachim as well. So if there are two paths, echad tameh ve'echad tahor, one is definitely tameh and one is definitely tahor. V'halach be'echad mehem ve'asa taharos. You have person number one who walked along path number one and then touched some tahorot, some touched some pure food. So, and then person number two went on path number two and also touched some tahor food. So Rabbi Yehuda Omer, so tahoros. If they each ask on their own, we'll assume that everybody is tahor. But if they but if they ask all at once, well, then we'll consider them tameh. Rabbi Yossi Omer, bein kachu bein kach tameh. No matter what, you got to say that they're tameh. For Amar Rava, the same Rabbi Yochanan, v'vas achas divrei kol tameim. That, and so in qualifying this machlokas, where it seems like one is saying tahor and one is saying tameh, we're going to clarify it that everybody agrees that if they all come together at one moment, the person number one and person number two who went on path number one and path number two, well, then we're going to definitely say that they're tameim. On the other hand, if they each come individually, well, then of course we're going to say that they are tahor according to both, because of course when the first person comes, you didn't even know that the second person was going to come. So really the question is about the second person, and of course with the second person, why should they be treated any differently from the first person? So lo nechlaku ela b'va lishal alav al chaveiro. So if the person who comes first asks also about the other person, so then that's the question. So Mar Madamale Kivas one, the Rabbi Yossi says it's like they all came together, and so therefore he's going to say it's Tameh. Umar Madamale and the Rabbi Yehuda says no, that's like one coming after the other. So why don't we say the same basic principle here? Since we're trying to permit them all at once, Kivas Akas Dami, this is like them all coming together at one time, and Rabbi Yossi should say it's prohibited. And indeed, according to Tosfos, maybe this is even for Rabbi Yehuda, would also treat it as all coming at once. So, as we said, everybody agrees that if they all come literally at once, we'll treat it as tameh. So haki hashta. So now the Gemara rejects that attempt of proof and says the cases are not comparable, because in our case, Hasam, or in the case over there by the case of the two paths, Vada Ikatuma, there was one path that was definitely Tameh. Haki miyamar Tameh. Here, do we say that that any of the women were definitely violated? We don't have any evidence of that fact. We only know the likelihoods, and that's the concern. So therefore, we can't say that this is a comparable case. And maybe we would say, even if there's only one hiding place, that we would say that that is okay, and therefore we should allow the woman to go back to her husband. And indeed, it would seem, again based on the Mishpah Ner Mitzvah, that seems to be the way we paskin. So by Rav Ashi. So now Rav Ashi asks, Amra lonich beisi lonich beisi. If a woman says mahu, what's the case if the woman says I wasn't hidden and I was not violated? So mi amrinan, do we say about her mali l'shaker? What reason do I have to lie? O dilma lo amrinan, or do we say no? So because again, she could have said that she was the one that was hidden. So umayshna me'ahu ma'isadahu gabra. How is this different from the following story? The agar lechamra lechavre. A person rented a donkey from his friend. Amrle, the friend said to him, listen, lo tezel bo'orcha de nahar code de ikamaya. Please don't go down by the Code River, because there's a lot of water there, and I'm worried that my donkey is going to drown. So we can imagine that today. If you rent a car, right? If you rent a car and the person says, don't take the Deegan because because when it rains, because I'm worried about the flooding that's associated with it. So, and then what did the guy do? the guy did not listen. He was not a good friend. Zil Borcha Daenerys delay Kamaya. I'm sorry. So instead, the friend says, Zil Borcha Daenerys delay Kamaya. Go by the Neresh. If you're going to go, don't take the Deegan, take the what's it called? The Bronx River Parkway. I think that's right. That's probably right. So we'll flip it. Don't take the Bronx River Parkway. Take the Deegan. Exactly. Okay. Although my wife says, you never take the Deegan and say you're happy that you took the Deegan. But okay. All right. So in any event, what did the guy go and do? Oh my gosh, he went down the wrong road. He went to the Pecode River. He went to the Bronx River Parkway, and the donkey died, and the car went kaput. So do we say? So now also Likame de Rava Amarle. I know it is terrible. So I know we lost the donkey. So now the guy comes to Rava, and so he comes to the judge, and he says to the judge, listen. In Bo'orcha Dinar Pekodes, it is true that I went to the Pecode River. It is true that I took the Bronx River Parkway. However, miu lo havamaya, but there wasn't any water there. It wasn't because of the water that the donkey died. And so don't make me liable for going in a place that I wasn't supposed to go. So Amarava Mali Lashakir. So Rava says, again, do we apply the reason of what reason do I have to lie? So Ibai Amar Le Borcha because he could have said I went to the correct road. He could have said I took the Neresh road. I took the Deegan. But however, Abaye says no. Mali l'shakar b'mokum edim lo amrinan. We have to realize that when it comes to apparently the Pecode River, it never doesn't have any water. And so as a result, Abaye is saying, when we are so sure that in fact there was water there, where you can't rely on that. And so as a result, what do we see? And that seems to be the end of the discussion. So it seems like Abaye's case won. So we see that we don't apply in this particular case the story of we don't apply the story of allow the person to say I could have said something else, because once he says the wrong thing, it's clear that the bad thing happened because of the water, because there was certainly water. So of course now the Gemara is going to use a similar refutation that we saw a few moments ago. So Hachi Hashta, are you comparing these two cases? Hasam Vada Ika Edom de Ika Maya, right? So there were, we're talking about a situation where there was definitely water. So again, the term definite obviously is not as strong as in the case where we were talking about Tameh and two paths, because in the case where there were two paths, one 100% had Tameh and one 100% did not. But in this case, it's not 100% that there was water, but everybody knows that whenever it rains, that Pecode is going to definitely overflow, and you don't want to go anywhere nearby. So as a result, that is sufficient to overcome the person saying Mali l'shakir, right? What reason do I have to lie? I could have said a different and better lie. And so if in fact it's effectively almost impossible, so then we'll also apply this. But hacha vadai itamai, but here, was the woman definitely violated? No. Chashashahu, it's just a suspicion. Chashasha amrinan. So the bottom line is that even if there's only one place to hide, if the woman says that I didn't hide, but I was not violated, as long as there is that place to hide, that then it's going to be okay. Of course, unfortunately, this Gemara became very relevant in connection with the Holocaust, and this was often used in order to enable women to stay with their husbands. So we say that if there is even a slave, we're going to believe the slave. And so the Gemara asks, Do we even believe her slave? So why do you think that we don't believe her slave?
She's not telling the truth.
Maybe she's not telling the truth, because after all, it's her master who's the one that we're talking about. So excellent point, Mark. That's exactly what we're going to say. So Uraminhu, I'll show you that there's another Gemara that seems to indicate that we don't trust her own slave, because what does it say in Maseches Gittin? Lo tityachedimo. If a man is on his deathbed, and just in case, in order to prevent having and they don't have any children, and he's trying to make sure that he does not force his wife to have to go through Yibum and Chalitza with his brother, who might not be the greatest of guys. So he gives his wife a get. But once he does so, he's not allowed to be alone with her. And so as a result, Ella al pi edim, rather he has to be in the presence of witnesses. Even a servant is sufficient to serve as a witness in this regard. However, but it doesn't work with her slave, because she'll be more willing to do things in front of her own slave, because that's the relationship. So now we're going to offer three different answers. So Amar of Papi, Bishvuya Hekelo. Actually, we could say that in a case of captivity, we'll be lenient and we will allow the testimony even of her slave. Answer number two, Rav Papa says, no. No. The Mishnah over there is talking about with her slave. However, when it's his slave, well, then that will be sufficient. So if his slave is the one who testifies that the woman was not violated, we will believe her. Okay? But her slave, in fact, we will not believe. The shivcha lo mehemna. 1 second. Are you really saying that her slave is not trusted? Hakatani ein adam made al atzmo. That we have a Mishnah that says a person's not allowed to testify on his own behalf. In fact, our Mishnah says, right, that the person's not allowed to testify on his own behalf. That implies that implies that her shifcha should also be believed. So how can you say that our Mishnah was referring to his shifcha and not her shifcha? It seems, based on the fact that we say that only a person cannot testify on his own behalf, that we're talking about any slave woman. So shivcha sanami ka'atzma dami. So the Gemara explains that when we say that a person is not allowed to testify on his own behalf, her shifcha is considered like her own behalf, and so as a result, therefore, it is she cannot testify, and she similarly, her slave woman cannot testify. Okay, and so again, when it says a slave woman in our Mishnah, it's talking about his slave woman. So Rav Ashi Amar, and Rav Ashi says a third solution. No, really, both Mishnayos are talking about her slave, the shivcha michsa chazya b'shaska. But when it comes to her slave, so her slave will be, she's willing to be quiet, right, and not talk about anything. So as a result, she's not a good witness when it comes to yichud. But hazam d'shtika matira sa below mahemna. So as a result, over there, all she has to do is be quiet, and she will be. And so as a result, she's not going to be trusted. She doesn't actually have to testify to anything. But hacha d'shikasa osarta mehemna. However, here, not only does she have to be quiet about what happened, but she has to actually go ahead and testify. Without the testimony, she will not be believed. So hashtanami asya umashakra. So, but 1 second, why won't she testify? Why won't she testify falsely? After all, if she's willing to be quiet, maybe she'll be willing to testify. So tarti lo avda, she's not going to do both things. She's not going to both keep silent and testify falsely. Kihada Mari bar Isak, just as we had the case with Mari bar Isak. What happened in that situation? Amri la Chana bar Isak. And some people say it wasn't Mari, it was Chana. But what happened? Asale acha bin bechoza. So the brother comes from Bechoza, and it was a situation where the brother had been taken away by the father as a young child, and so wants now to inherit with the rest of the children that the father had. And so now he's grown up. So Amrle, so the brother says, this is the brother who came from Bechoza, Plogli benichse badaba. I want a share of dad's inheritance. So Amrle, Mari says to him, Lo yadan alach. I don't know who you are. I don't recognize you, because the kid had left when he was a little kid and he came back when he was a grown-up. Well, what story does that remind you of when somebody doesn't recognize somebody because in the Bible where they didn't exactly Joseph? So exactly. So Asala Kamei the Rav Chisda, it came before Rav Chisda. Amrle, Shapir Kamerlach. He spoke right to you, meaning that he doesn't recognize you. Dixiv by Yakir Yosef. This story was 1,800 years ago or so. Oh, they didn't know. The story, in the story, it was maybe 15 or 20 years. Yeah, it's a long time not to see your brother. So anyway, so in the story of Yosef, it was about 22 years. So, okay. So we can say that this is same kind of thing here. So Rav Chisda says, Mari, it's right that Mari doesn't recognize you because right? Yosef recognized his brothers, but they didn't recognize him. Right, exactly. We're going to read that exactly right now. This teaches that Yosef left his brothers when he didn't have a beard. Uva b'chasimas zakan. And when he came back to them, when they saw him, so he did have a beard. So as a result, that's why they didn't recognize him. So Amar Le, Rav Chisda then says to the brother, Zil aite sade dakuahat. You got to bring witnesses to show that you're the brother. So Amar Le, the brother says to him, Isli Sade, I've got witnesses, but they're afraid of my brother because he's a very Degavra Almahu, because he's a very powerful guy. So Amr Le Lidide. So now Rav Chisda turns back to Mari and says, okay, so Zil Atinu at Delav Achochi. So now you have to prove that he's not your brother. So Amr Le, Mari says to Rav Chisda, Dina Haki, is that the law? Hamotzi Mechaber al Baraya. He's the one who's trying to take away from me, so he should have the burden of proof. So Amrle, Hachi de inanalach l'chulu almei chabrech. So yes, in fact, this is the rule when somebody who's powerful like you and uses their power to intimidate witnesses. So then we are going to be concerned about that. So as a result, so hashtinami asum mashakre. So maybe in fact, just as even if they bring witnesses, even if Mari is able to bring witnesses, we'll say that he'll bring witnesses and he'll scare them into lying. So why aren't we worried about that? Two things people won't do. People, to just remain silent and not, is one thing. But to testify falsely, people don't go that far. They're not that obnoxious. So Lemu Ketanai, say that this is a dispute among Tanaim, meaning that some people say that we are worried about double wrongs, meaning not only being quiet inappropriately, but also testifying inappropriately. So because we have the following, Zoedus, this testimony that permits a woman who's captive to go back to her husband, Ish v'isha, a man or a woman, Tinok v'tinokes, whether a child, a boy or a girl, a little boy or a girl, Avia v'ima, the father or the mother, v'achia v'achosa, the brother and the sister, all of them are able to testify about the fact that the woman was not violated. Avalo v'na uvita, but not her son or her daughter, because they have something to gain for it. Below avda v'shivchasa, and not her slave or her slave woman. And on the other hand, we have the second opinion in that brisa is, or we also have another brisa that says everyone is believed, except for herself and her husband. So we see that in this second brisa, even the slave woman is believed. So the Rav Papi, the Rav Ashi Tanaihi. Now, Rav Papi and Rav Ashi were the two people who answered our question by saying that, in fact, in our Mishnah, even a woman's own slave is able to testify. And so as a result, clearly the first opinion that we cite in these two brisas must disagree with them because it explicitly says that her slave and her slave women are not able to testify. So as a result, clearly they have to say that it's a Tanaic dispute. However, to Rav Papa, when it comes to Rav Papa, he does not need to say that. Milema Tanaihi, does he also have to say it? So the Gemara is going to ask, and we're going to say no. Amrullah Rav Papa could say the following. Ki Tanyahi, when was the second brisa talking about the Mesicha Lefi Tuma? That there's a separate case where you're not actually testifying in court, but you're just telling a story. And when you tell a story, if you don't know the ramifications of that story and you're not in a court setting, well, then we'll trust you. Kiha dechi asa Rabdimi Amar. There was a case like when Rabdimi came from Babel to Eretz Yisrael. What did he say, or what happened? Rav Chanan Kartigana Mishtai. So Rav Chanan of Carthage, he told the following story. Ma'isa Balifnei Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi. The following happened to Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi. The Amrila, and some people say Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi Mishtai. It was Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi who told this over. So Ma'isa Balifnei Rabbi, somebody came in front of Rabbi. He was just testifying about to Rabbi, telling him a story. And what did he say? My mom and I were captives among idolaters. Yatsasi lish of mine, when I would go out to gather water, dati alimi, I was worried about my mom. I was thinking about my mom, meaning I wanted to make sure that my mom was not violated even for a moment. So I would always pay attention to what she was doing. Lakit eitzim, when I would go out to gather wood. So again, dati alimi, I would watch over her. The hisia Rabbi lechuna alpiv, and based on that, Rebbe permitted her to remain married or presumably the husband died, and so as a result, she was able to marry a Kohen. Okay, so that brings us to our next Mishnah. And in the last Mishnah, we noted that one can't testify on one's own behalf. And so now this Mishnah that highlights a story that shows that you can't testify on your own behalf. So Amar Rabbi Zechariah ben Hakatzav said about his own wife, Hama'on hazeh, oi, from this I swear by the Beit HaMikdash, lo zaza yada mitoch yadi, that she did not leave my side. She did not leave my side. From the time that the idolaters came into Yerushalayim to destroy it. So this is a Daf Yomi coincidence that we're now commemorating the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash, and so she was not violated. I can tell you for sure that she was not violated. Amrulo ein adam meid al atzmo. As terrible as it seems, we're not going to believe you based on your own testimony. So let's see if we can get a little bit further. So Tana, we have a brisa that taught ba'afal pichein. So even though he was not allowed to testify on his own behalf and thereby be back together with his wife, yichadla b'bayit b'chatziro. He was allowed to set up a home for her in his courtyard. And what would they do in order to make sure that they weren't together? So now this is a lot of the halachos associated with yichud. When she would go out, she would take the children out, and she would be the first one to leave, and the children would follow her. But when she would come back, she would be sure to come back after her children. So that way, her children would always be present and ensure that they weren't engaging in yichud. All right, and that's what Rashi explains. Even though she was in a separate house, because they were all together in the same courtyard. Okay, so boy Abaye, so Maula sos begrusha came. What's the law about doing this in connection with a grusha, with a divorcee, meaning especially in particular for a Kohen? Hasam was this a special case that we were lenient because a woman was captive? Aval hachalo, but in case with a Kohen who divorces somebody who cannot remarry them, we would say no. O dilma loshna, or do we say no? It doesn't make a difference. So tashma, the Tanya hamagarish es ishto lo sinase b'shkunaso. If a person divorces his wife, so she should not remarry and then live in the first husband's neighborhood. All right. V'im haya kohen, and if he was a kohen, lo tador imo b'mavoy. She can't even dwell with him in a mavoy, even in a larger. V'im haya kfar katan, and if it's a very small town, zeh haya ma'isa v'amru kfar katan nidon kishkuna. That a small town is considered like a village. So it would seem from this that we do differentiate between a divorce situation and a captive situation, that we can be more lenient in the captive situation. And so we'll pick up and stay tuned tomorrow as we start by asking, what if they both want to stay in the same town? Who is the one who gets to decide that they get to stay in the same town? So we'll find that out as we begin the daf tomorrow. Sounds like a sitcom. Three's Company, something along those lines. Yeah, I know. All right. Have a great day. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.